And thank you so much for attending this presentation tonight. My name is Mark Klapach-Mathias, and I'm here representing two of the sponsors for tonight's event, including the University of Wisconsin River Falls Office of Sustainability and Hope for Creation. I would like to start by mentioning two upcoming events. I will then highlight all of our sponsors for tonight's event, and then I will introduce Dr. Terry Root. After her presentation, we will open it up for questions and answers via the chat or comment functions. Please hold all questions until the end. First, I would like to make you aware of two upcoming events that will also be hosted by the River Falls Public Library, one occurring on December 3rd and one on January 25th. The presentation on December 3rd will be the UWRF Office of Sustainability presenting on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which will highlight how we as a community can support and contribute to the global goals. The presentation on January 25th will be another Nobel Prize laureate, Dr. Jonathan Overpeck, who will focus on the effects climate change has had on our waterways and fish. Please save those dates. Our first sponsor for tonight's event is the River Falls Public Library. The River Falls Public Library enriches lives and builds community by connecting people with information, ideas, spaces, and opportunities. We are so thankful to have this library as part of our community and appreciate their ongoing efforts to host events highlighting climate change. The next sponsor is the St. Croix River Association. As the official nonprofit partner for the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway, the St. Croix River Association creates opportunities for people to experience and care for the St. Croix and Nemekagong rivers. They work throughout the St. Croix watershed to protect and enhance the national park that flows through its heart. More information is available at www.stcroixriverassociation.org. Another sponsor is Powerful Choices. Powerful Choices is a community-wide effort to instill a strong local conservation ethic while demonstrating the importance and effectiveness of conservation, energy efficiency, and renewable energy. Powerful Choices, a department of the River Falls Municipal Utilities, recognizes that utilities play a large role in finding solutions to reduce humans' impact on climate change. Co-sponsoring talks and community events like this is an example of how we're listening and turning it into action. The next sponsor is the University of Wisconsin River Falls Office of Sustainability, which endeavors to engage students, faculty, staff, and the wider community through hands-on educational and volunteer opportunities to further expand our shared integrity as socially, economically, and environmentally responsible citizens. We do this through hosting campus events, partnering with community events, and working collaboratively across campus and beyond to improve sustainability in all of its facets. Our final sponsor and the driving force behind getting tonight's speaker is the River Falls community group, Hope for Creation. Hope for Creation is a group of area churches with representation from the city and the university, partnering together to create a hopeful, sustainable future through collaboration, education, advocacy, and action. Hope for Creation acknowledges the urgency of our environmental challenges and seeks ways to protect the earth, our common home. Hope for Creation supports the deeply rooted values of our faith traditions, which call us to respectful stewardship of the land, air, waters, and all living things. Thank you again to all of our sponsors for your hard work in our community and region. If any of the viewers tonight would like to get in touch with any of these organizations, feel free to email sustainability@uwrf.edu and we can send you contact information for each organization. Once again, that's sustainability@uwrf.edu. Many of these groups also have websites and Facebook pages. It is now my pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight, Dr. Terry Root. Dr. Root is a senior fellow, University Faculty Emerita in the Woods Institute for the Environment at Stanford University. Her research addresses how plants and animals are changing with the changing climate, including the examination of extinction risk of species. She was a lead author of the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change Fourth Assessment Report that in 2007 was co-awarded the Nobel Peace Prize with Vice President Al Gore. She was a lead author for the third assessment report in 2001 and a review editor of the fifth assessment report in 2014. In addition to other honors, Root was awarded the Spirit of Defenders Award for Science by Defenders of Wildlife in 2010 and the Lifetime Achievement Award in 2016 from the conservation organization Point Blue. She has served on the boards and as science advisor to several non-governmental organizations, including the National Audubon Board from 2010 through 2019. Currently, she is on the board for Defenders of Wildlife and American Wind and Wildlife Institute. Root earned her undergraduate degree in mathematics and statistics from the University of New Mexico, her master's degree in biology from the University of Colorado, and her doctorate in biology from Princeton University. She was a professor at the University of Michigan for 14 years until she moved to Stanford University, where she was on the faculty for 15 years. She retired and moved to Sarasota, Florida in the summer of 2015. Thank you, Dr. Root, for presenting tonight. I now hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Mark. I really appreciate it. And I want to also thank all of the people who are sponsoring this talk. As you can imagine, I don't think there's anything more important than we need to be facing is worrying about climate change and coming up with what we can do about it. And that's the nice thing about climate change, is that it's doing horrible things to our world, but there's a lot we can do and we can change it. So when they asked me for a title, I started to tell them, well, it's changing this and that and all. I thought, oh, for Pete's sake, it's just changing, well, everything. So that's where the title came from. Let me tell you first what I'm going to be talking to you about tonight. First, I'm going to go through and tell you about climate change since the beginning, basically, of the Industrial Revolution. So it will be when the fossil fuel addiction started and all the CO2 started going up into the atmosphere. Then I'm going to switch gears and talk a little bit about the future of climate change. I don't have a crystal ball, but the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, has come up with different scenarios that may be occurring in the future, and we're going to talk a little bit about those. And now, I'm a biologist, I'm not a climatologist, and so what I really want to do is talk about how climate change is affecting other species. And since I primarily got into biology because of birds, birds are going to be a central part of that. And then I'd have to warn you, the first, the second, and the third parts of this talk can be pretty depressing. But I want you to hold on with me, okay? Don't give up, because the fourth part is very, very positive, very, very hopeful. If I didn't have hope, I'd go to Disney World and not worry about this. There's a lot of hope, there's a lot of things we can do, and so the fourth part, I'm actually going to be talking to you about what we all can and must do to change things. So let's get started now. Now, what this is showing you is the global temperature change in degrees C relative to before, right at the very beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And you can see back in the 40s, the 50s, it was fairly cool. But now, as soon as you get to the 70s, now it starts getting hotter and hotter and hotter. So by 2017, we were almost out to 1.5 degrees C. So it really has gotten a lot warmer. Now, since that stopped at 2017, I wanted to show you that it has continued to get warmer. So that's what this plot is showing you. This is global decades of warming. And again, it is relative to before the Industrial Revolution. So it is it's called anomalies. It's the change. So it has warmed by almost 1.2 degrees Celsius in the 2010s. So it has really warmed quite a bit over what it would have been if we hadn't had the fossil fuel addiction that we've been having. So it really has warmed. And I would like you all to please make a pact with me today. And please don't ever say again that you believe in global warming or you believe in climate change. It's not a belief. It truly is a fact. And that's what I think this slide actually shows you. Now, this year has been very strange, very, very strange. And this is what has been predicted by the IPCC. As the climate begins to change, we're going to have these extremes. So on August 16th, 2020, it was 130 degrees Fahrenheit in Death Valley in California. Now think about that. At 104 degrees Fahrenheit, enzymes start denaturing. So humans are lucky. We can go in and be in air conditioning. Think about what's going on with the plants. They're denaturing their enzymes, and animals, unless they can burrow and hide away from the sunlight. But 130 degrees, that was a record. We've also had record fires, and that's been going on for many years. This is actually a picture of a fire that happened in Australia. And the reason that I'm using this is if you can actually see in the smoke up in this area, this is an artist's rendition of the flames. So the flames are actually a picture, but he's showing you a rendition of the smoke. And you can see the two koalas, because when it is burning, when the forests are burning, animals are dying. And literally hundreds of thousands to millions of species, or individuals, individuals die every time there is a forest fire. And I'm talking about vertebrates, so birds, mammals, and lizards, reptiles, amphibians, that type of thing. So it's very, very costly. Plus, you have to worry about what it's doing to humans, and that is absolutely devastating. The other thing that's been going on is we've been having these crazy hurricanes. I'm down in Sarasota, Florida. We worry about the hurricanes. So this was a day when we made a record. There were actually 6 named storms out in the Atlantic, and that had never, ever happened before. So that was a first. And now we have another first, and this just happened. We actually have 10 named storms now that Delta has actually hit. This slide was done before Delta hit Louisiana. But anyway, with Delta hitting Louisiana, we have 10 named storms or hurricanes that have hit North America in 2020. That's a record. So we now have another record with hurricanes. So let's look at what's gone on. Here is the warming in the United States, and this is showing you since the very first Earth Day. And the very first Earth Day occurred in 1970. So it's been 50 years since our first Earth Day. And the United States has warmed by 2.4 degrees Fahrenheit. So it really has gotten warmer. 2.4 may not seem like a lot, but when you're looking at different locations, it can be quite high. And let's talk about the locations where most of you are. This is near the Minneapolis-St. Paul region, which is where most of you, I believe, are. And so since the very first Earth Day in 1970, it has warmed 3.4 degrees Fahrenheit over that 50 years. That's a lot of warming. Now, what's gone on also is there has been warming of summer nights. So the average low temperature has warmed again since 1970 by 4.2 degrees. So the nights in the summer have gotten warmer, and the winters have gotten warmer also. They've warmed by 5.5 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a lot of warming. So there's a lot of warming going on in all of the world, all of the US, and in particular places around the US. Now, when the land is warming, there's other things that are warming too, and the big one has to do with the oceans. The fresh water is also warming, but the oceans are warming, and that's what's shown here. On the x-axis is years, which is almost what all of my slides have, is years on the x-axis. On the y-axis is just showing you how much warmth is being taken in by the oceans. And you can see how it has gone from being cooler, and now it is really getting quite warm. So the oceans are warming. Now, that's a concern because as water gets warmer, it expands, and that's going to make the sea levels go up. So we have 2 things that are causing the sea levels to go up: the warming of the water and the melting of the ice that is on the land. So we have Greenland melting and Antarctica is melting, and the glaciers are melting. So all of that is contributing to sea level rise, which is something we need to be worrying about also. Now, what's causing all of this? Well, this slide on the bottom is again showing years, but it's kind of a little weird. It is years before now. And now literally means today. The value that I got for now, the 413 parts per million of CO2 concentration in our atmosphere, is hot off the presses as of today. But if you look at the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere going back 800,000 years ago, they've done it by looking at the ice cores. You can see that the concentration of CO2 in our atmosphere has never been above 300 parts per million until now. And what's different now than was back then? Our fossil fuel addiction. It's the fossil fuel that is putting out the CO2 into the atmosphere and holding it out there. So it's at 413 now, and CO2 holds in heat, and so that's what's causing the Earth to get warmer. Now that's what's gone on in the past. Now let's talk a little bit about what could be going on in the future. Now for the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, they have come up with 4 different scenarios, actually more than that, but I want to just show you these 4. On the x-axis again is year, and on the y-axis is again the same as what was before, the parts per million of CO2, but it says CO2 equivalent because what's also considered in here is other kind of gases, greenhouse gases that are not just CO2. So methane is in there, water vapor, that type of thing is also included in this. And so you can see on here, there's 4 different lines. The top line, the black line, is the business as usual. That's assuming that we do not do anything at all to change what we do. We are going to continue on as normal. Now, when Obama was in office, we came down off of that line a smidgen, and it was measurable. And now when Trump has gotten back into office, we have gone up higher above business as usual. So we're going faster than this black curve shows. But what it's showing is at 2100, we could be up as high above 1200 parts per million of CO2 equivalent. The temperature of the Earth will be astronomical, and I'll talk to you about that in a second. Then we have these two curves, the blue and the green one. And those are curves where we have an egalitarian world, where there's a lot of sharing going back and forth. So you have one country coming up with some kind of mechanism to do something, and they share that mechanism with another country. There's no competition. There's a lot of help. Everybody's working together to try to get the temperature down, the CO2 out of the atmosphere. And if we do that, then we could be on either the blue or green line. There's subtle differences in the blue and green line, but what I really want to get across is it's lower than the business as usual. Now let's look at that red line. That red line really disturbed me when the first time I saw it, because what it says is in 2016, so back here, this is when this plot was drawn, was 2016. They said that God clicked her fingers and stopped all CO2 and other greenhouse gases from going up into the atmosphere. If that was the case, if she clicked her fingers and stopped all of the gases going up into the atmosphere, you would expect that that line would drop immediately. But it doesn't. Look, all the way out at 2100, it's only back down to about 400 parts per million. Why didn't it drop more? That's because CO2 that we put in our atmosphere right now, today, will be there for 1,000 years. It takes a very, very long time to get the CO2 out of our atmosphere. It takes 1,000 years. 1,000 years is 40 generations. So what we are doing today is affecting our great, 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 39 greats, grandchildren, and it's affecting their lives. 39 greats, grandchildren will be affected by what we are doing today. That's a very sobering thought, at least it was to me. It still gives me goosebumps. So what we do today truly, truly matters. And there's a lot we can do to stop that. Now, this is showing you the areas of open for oil and gas leasing. This is for Obama. This is for Trump. It'll cycle again. This is for Bush, the new areas. These are the new areas that Obama put forward. These are the new areas that Trump is putting forward. Folks, we can't afford that. So that has to stop. If we put that much carbon up into the atmosphere, we're going to be way above the business as usual, and that's going to be devastating. This is the same kind of plot as I showed you before, except for actual data. These are modeled data, and it's showing you the difference between, say, 1950 and the average of the temperature from 1850 to 1900. And you're seeing that it's getting warmer. 2050, it's warmer, it's warmer, it's warmer. So if we stay on the business as usual curve that I showed you in the previous slide, by 2100, the temperature will be 5 degrees Celsius above natural, above what it would be if we didn't have our fossil fuel addiction. It just keeps getting warmer and warmer and warmer. And we can't afford that. So we have to do something about it, and we can. Now, let's talk a little bit about sea level rise. What that slide says, I'm not sure you can actually see it, but in 2018, it shows that we were 8 inches higher in sea level rise from 1880. So in 1880, the sea level rise, in 2018, the sea level is 8 inches higher than it was in 1880. Now, if we're going to be looking at 2050, and we're assuming that the person who's standing there is about 6 feet tall, what the different scientists are assuming is at a low estimate, we have 19 inches. Or at the high estimate, it's going to be 31 inches. And then at 2100, what the estimates are for a low estimate is 6.5 feet, and 2100 is 9 feet. Feet. I'm not talking inches, I'm talking feet. And people are saying that we really are on a track right now to hit the high estimates, not the low estimates. And then about 3 weeks ago now, we got word from scientists that have been working in Greenland. This is a picture of Greenland, and Greenland's ice shelf is melting. And the scientists about three weeks ago said that we have passed the tipping point of the melting of Greenland. And that's a very, very scary thing, because what that means is the ice has gotten low enough that now it is warm enough, because it's low, that it is going to go ahead and melt all the way. We are not going to be able to stop it from melting. And that is 27 to 29 feet of sea level rise just in Greenland alone. 27 to 29 feet of sea level rise. And this doesn't take into account Antarctica. So all of us that live in Florida need to take note of all of this. Now, this isn't going to happen by 2100, but it's not going to be forever either. It's going to come, and we're going to have to deal with it. And the number of people who are going to be environmental refugees because they're going to need to be moving from where they live is going to be in the tens of millions. Now, the IPCC decided that they needed to come along and say, this is what we need to do to stay at around 1.5 degrees C above natural, or that's 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit above natural. Because if we stay at that level, then a lot of things that we know could go wrong won't go wrong. So we know that the frozen methane that's in the oceans can start melting if we get up to 2 degrees C above natural. And we don't want that to happen because methane is a very strong greenhouse gas. So the IPCC came out and said, this is what we have to do it. And we know we can do it, and we'll give you the recipe for it. So again, on the x-axis is years, on the y-axis is gigatons of CO2 that is put into the atmosphere per year. So in 2010, it was below 40 gigatons. 2017, oopsie, we were going up instead of down. We needed to be going down. And then in 2030, not very long from now, folks, 10 years from now, what we have to do, according to the scientists that have done the studies of this, is we need to be at 45% of the CO2 going into the atmosphere that went in 2010. So we want to be at 2030, we want to be at 45% of the total amount that we put in the atmosphere in 2010. Is it possible? Absolutely. We can do it. We just have to do it. And that will keep us at the limit of 1.5 degrees C or 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit above natural. And that's the limit that the Paris Accord was talking about. And then they also said that by 2050, we have to be at zero. That is going to be very difficult because we are a society that uses a lot of plastics. And plastic comes from fossil fuel. And for every pound of plastic, we put 6 pounds of CO2 into the atmosphere. That's a lot of CO2 going up into the atmosphere. So next time you take a plastic bag, think twice and say, no, I would rather use my own cloth bags because it really does put a lot of CO2 in the atmosphere. But by 2050, how do we get to zero? It's going to be difficult. But again, the scientists have told us how to do it. We can do it. We just have to have the will to do it, and we can. So what do? What have they asked us to do? One of the things is in the transportation sector, what we have to do is we have to have low emission vehicles. So by 2020, we were about 5%. By 2050, we have to be about 50% of the vehicles need to be low emission vehicles. Can we do that? Of course we can. There's no reason why we can't, especially with Elon Musk helping us so much with the battery cars. We can do that. Next thing we have to do is we have to deal with the electricity market. And in the electricity market, the percentage of non-biomass renewables has to be about 50% by 2030 and about 70% by 2050. Can we do this? In North America, we can't. I gave a talk at the American Wind and Wildlife Institute, and I put this slide up, and people started laughing. And I said, wait. This isn't a joke slide. And finally, a friend of mine in the back of the room stood up and said, Terry, there's absolutely no way we can do that in America. Well, maybe we can't make it by 2030, but if we get the political will, I do think that America can make it by 2050. We just have to have the political will to do it. Now, the other thing is that people say, oh my God, we can't have wind turbines Because it kills birds. Well, the oil and gas industry has done a really good job of convincing us that we really do kill birds with wind turbines. I'm here to tell you that we don't. Remember, I was on the National Audubon Society, and I was the one who pushed very strongly for having wind turbines, because we've done a study and we have found that small birds, not the larger birds, but the smaller birds, that around 3.7 smaller birds are killed per turbine per year. Per year. So it's not really damaging the smaller birds. Larger birds is a difference, and they're coming up with ways to ensure that the larger birds are not killed. It also is killing bats. That is a problem indeed. I'm not sure how we're going to solve that, but we've got a lot of ingenuity and we can do that too. But what really kills birds, I want to show you what really kills birds, is cats. So turbines is all the way over on the right-hand side, and it says 234,000 birds are killed with turbines in a year. Now, on the left-hand side, it says 2.4 billion with a B birds are killed per year by cats in North America. We have 80 million feral cats, and we have 80 million domestic cats in North America, roughly. So if you have a cat, that's wonderful, but keep it inside. And if you absolutely have to let it outside, only let it out during the day. Make sure it's inside during the night, because most of those deaths come at night. Now, other things are killing our birds. They're running into windows. They're running into automobiles, or automobiles are running into them. They're hitting power lines, towers. They're being electrocuted, and then the turbines are there. But the real way, if people are up in arms about turbines killing birds, all you need to do is turn around and say, what we really need to be working on is cats, because it's the cats, primarily the feral cats. 80 million feral cats in North America are killing a lot of birds and small mammals, but we're talking about birds right now. Okay, so that tells you a little bit about future climate change, and I started talking a little bit about birds. So let's talk more about what's going on with our birds and other species. Well, a study was done looking at how many birds actually exist in North America, and we have had, since 1900, the Audubon Society has been counting birds, literally since the Christmas time of 1900. I'm not kidding you. And then Fish and Wildlife began counting birds in 1960, and putting the information from both of those counting efforts together, the scientists have found that since 1970, we have lost almost 3 billion individual birds. 3 billion individual birds. That's primarily due to habitat destruction, somewhat due to climate change, but primarily habitat destruction. What that means is 1 in every 4 birds that we had in 1970 is gone. And people who are old like I am realize that. When I used to go out bird watching, it was a lot easier to find birds. They were around more often. It was easier to find them. Now it is harder, because 1/4 of the birds that were around in 1970 are gone. Gone. That's very, very sobering. And that's also causing many species to be on the brink of extinction. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Now, I want to stress to you all how interrelated species are in the wild. I was lucky enough in 1994 to go to the North Pole. And this was a polar bear that we found, and it had just killed a seal out on the ice. And when it kills a seal, it takes it and it literally flings blood and guts all over the ice. And then there's this little guy here. If you can see the bird right here, that's an ivory gull. That ivory gull makes its living by cleaning up after the polar bear. It eats all that flung around blood and guts. Well, since the ice has melted, polar bears aren't going out on the ice and killing seals. That's good for seals, not good for polar bears, and definitely not good for ivory gulls, because now the ivory gull population is plummeting. And I promise you, I'm 66 years old, that by the time my normal life expectancy expires, the ivory gull will be extinct. It is on its way out, and we don't have a way to really stop it. But that's the interactions that are going on between the polar bear, the seals, and the ivory gull. That type of interaction goes wrong with all species all over the world. So if you push on one, other ones get affected by it. This is a plot that is showing that there's a change in timing of things. And again, on the x-axis is years. On the y-axis is this weird thing called date index. What this is people went around in Australia, Asia, Europe, and North America. Oh, and South America too. We're looking at when birds would arrive in the springtime. And what they found was they are coming earlier and earlier and earlier. And it has to be a date index because Australia and South America's spring is our fall, so we couldn't put a date in there. But what they did was they picked a date in I think it was like 1957. I believe that's when they said was 0. And then they just said, okay, how much earlier are things becoming as we go forward in time? And you can see that there is a quite a large decline. And you can see that they're coming earlier and earlier by even nine data indexes. So there's a real change. So I assume that's 9 days. The other thing that's happening is we have a change in range. Back in 1985, a colleague of mine, John Terborg, did a study in Peru. And what he looked at was a transect up a mountain. And at the lower levels, he found common scaled back antbird. And in the middle, from 800 to 1200 meters, he found the versicolored barbet. And up at the top, he found the variable antshrike. Now, he did that study so carefully that people recently did the exact same transect and recorded where the birds are. And here's where they are. So the common scale-backed antbird now goes up to about 1,000 feet. And the versicolored barbet now goes all the way up to 1,400. Uh-oh, there's no room for the variable antshrike. And it has been extirpated from that mountain. It no longer can occur there. It's too warm. So why have these species moved? They've gone up the range, up the mountain where it's cooler. So that's what's happening, is they're moving up. And as they move up, the ones that are up at the top are popping off and becoming extinct in those locations. The other thing we have to realize is species have moved around for millennia, but they didn't have scars on the land like this one, like what we cause. We have cities like this, We have farms, factories, freeways. I wouldn't want to be a turtle trying to get across the New Jersey Turnpike, for instance. So there's a lot of barriers that humans are putting in the way for all these species. Think of yourself if you were a butterfly trying to cross across this city or this area right now. How would you do it? It would be pretty tough. So we have to do things to help species get across areas like that. So humans are causing a lot of the destruction that is happening here. Now, Audubon did a fantastic study of birds, trying to figure out what could happen to birds, what could happen, not what will happen, but what could happen to birds if we continue on our business as usual and we keep getting warmer and warmer. And what they found is there were 389 birds that are on the brink. They are in high vulnerability of becoming extinct. They could become extinct. That is 2/3 of all of our North American birds are on the brink of possible extinction unless humans do something about it. And this is the magazine that they published. And up at the top, I've given you the website where you can actually go on Audubon's website and look at this. It's very, very instructive. So if you're a bird nerd like I am, go to audubon.org/climate/survival by degrees, because that's what they called the study. And you can find out what's going to happen to your birds. You put in your zip code and it tells you what's going to happen. So they made this special report and said, birds can't fight climate change, but we can. We have to fight it for the birds, and we can. Now, what they did was they actually looked at 140, actually more than that, million observations in the US, Canada, and in Mexico. And they also looked at climate at all of those locations, vegetation, human land use, a thing they called group-specific variables. So when you're looking at water birds, they were looking at water. When they were looking at desert birds, they were looking at where desert was, that type of thing. And they were able to get this information down to the level of 1 square kilometer. So you literally, I'm not lying, you literally can put your zip code into this program and they will tell you what's going on at your zip code. And that is exactly what I did. I put the zip code for the library into the program. And here's what I found. For one particular species, the Scarlet Tanager. This is the actual current range, summer range of the Scarlet Tanager. And you can see where it occurs. It's no surprises. But if we warm, and I hope it's if, not when, if we warm 3 degrees C above natural, remember, we're already 1.2 degrees C above natural, so we don't have much farther to go. But if we go 3 degrees C, what could happen is that the red area is showing you where the range is lost, and the blue area is showing you where range is gained, and the in-between colors are showing you where it actually still is occurring. So you actually have lost 68% of the range. It's stable in roughly 32% of its range, and it gains 24%. But in the location where River Falls is, it's gone. You will lose Scarlet Tanagers, which is a very sad thing. Now, the wonderful thing that Audubon did was they said, but we don't have to go up 3 degrees C. Let's assume that we only go up 1.5 degrees C. What's going to happen then? This is what could happen. So if we go up 1.5 degrees C, the red part that is lost, the part of the range that is lost now is only 32%. The stable part is 68%, and it gains 18. And the Scarlet Tanager stays around in your area. Now, what this program showed me when I got on it and was playing with it for the River Falls area, I found that 20 birds that occur in that zip code will be at 3 degrees C will be highly vulnerable to extinction. If we only go up 1.5 degrees C, remember we're 1.2 already, but if we stop at 1.5 or very close to that, only 2 species will be highly vulnerable instead of 20. That's worth it. That's worth the work that we need to do to try and stop at the 1.5 level. We can do it. It'll be tough, but we can do it. We also have to talk about extinction. This is a golden toad. This is the first species that was actually recorded as going extinct due to climate change. It's a Costa Rican, or was a Costa Rican species. It is now extinct in Costa Rica, which is pretty sad. But now all species go extinct, but biologists say the background extinction rate is less than 1 species in 1,000 species over 1,000 years. So what that means, that if you take a big room and you put 1,000 different species and let them grow for 1,000 years, less than 1 species will go extinct. That's what background extinction rate is. Let's talk about what extinction rate is now. The current extinction rate is about 1 species in 10 species, not 1,000 species, over 100 years, not 1,000 years. So now you have 10 species in a room and let them run for 100 years, you'll lose 1 species. That's very, very much faster than background rate. And it is very clear to the biologists, and we say very strongly that yes, indeed, we are in the 6th mass extinction event. We are watching, on our watch, we are watching species go extinct at a mass extinction rate. That's a scary thing to say. And I have a lot of trouble with that, because what gives 1 species, us, humans, the right to cause the extinction of that many species? The IPCC 4th assessment report came out and said, if or when we go up 2 degrees C above natural, 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit above natural, we could lose about 500,000 species to extinction. We know that we have about 2 million species on the planet. We actually have more than that, but we have names for about 2 million of them. So those are the ones we're talking about right now. So if we go up 2 degrees C, we could lose 1/4 of the species on the planet. If we go up 4 degrees C above natural, which is 7.2 degrees above Fahrenheit above natural, we could lose half the species on the planet. Half the species on the planet. I guarantee you that many of those species we're going to need to stay alive. So we don't want that to happen. Even in the 1/4 of the species that we cause to go extinct, there will be species we need to stay alive. So we need to get busy and keep our temperature below 2 degrees C above natural. Can we do it? We can. And that's what I want to talk to you about now. I know now you all are kind of depressed and saying, oh my God, why did I listen to this talk? Well, hold on, because I want to tell you about what we can, and we all can, and we must do this. And we just have to have the will to do it. First thing we have to do is have a paradigm shift. We've had them before. Blow in her face and she'll follow you anywhere. Okay, women out there, if somebody comes up and blows smoke in your face, what are you going to do? Here is an example of not one, but two paradigm shifts. No longer is it appropriate to smoke around other people, and no longer is it appropriate to take advantage of women. So here is an example of two paradigm shifts that we have done. We have had paradigm shifts in our history, a lot of them. All we need to do is have another one and say it's patriotic to actually be doing something about climate change. And we can do that. Here's another example. Food will win the war. We observe meatless days, wheatless days, and porkless days. So what they were saying, this was for World War, oh shoot, I don't remember if it was World War I or World War II. I think it was World War II, but don't hold me to that. This is an actual sign that they used, and I'm sorry, I don't know which war it was for. But what they did was they convinced the people in America to observe meatless days and wheatless days and porkless days to save those resources for our boys overseas. We had a paradigm shift. It was patriotic to do. Everybody did it. Everybody got behind it. Everybody was proud to do it. And we did it. We can have another paradigm shift. We just have to have the political will to do it. And we can do that. Now, this is a slide that I think shows by far the most hope of anything. What this is showing is tons of CO2 emitted per person. And I'm sorry, it's in 2016, but I don't have data any later than 2016. And what it's showing now is in Washington, D.C., in New York, and in California, they're all below 10 tons of CO2 emitted per capita. Then you have the US, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, and they're right about at 20. And then you have these crazy 3 states on the end: West Virginia, North Dakota, and Wyoming. What do they have in common? Coal. Coal is a very, very dirty, dirty, dirty fuel, and we need to avoid using it. We need to be using natural gas, not coal. But that's why there's so much CO2 emissions coming from West Virginia, North Dakota, and Wyoming. But what that's showing us is that we know what to do. California, New York, and certainly DC know what to do. All we have to do is do it. Now, I used to live in California, and I used to say, a Californian has never, ever met a regulation they didn't love. And yes, California does a lot of regulating, but it also is doing a lot to save the world. And if it knows how to do it, we can know how to do it. And Minnesota and Wisconsin are doing a lot too. Look at the difference between the orange bars and the red bars. That's a big, big change. So we just have to do it. And we can. We know how to do it. The other thing we need to be doing is planting native plants. All of the species out there, the wild species, need our help. And the best way we can help them, one of the best ways we can help them, is to plant native plants. So please, 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 please don't ever plant another non-native plant. There is no reason to do that anymore. We took out our front yard. My husband was thrilled because now he doesn't have to mow it. And we put in native flowers. And it's gorgeous. And we have a beautiful butterfly garden. And we have birds that are there. And we have bugs that are there. We used to have something like 6 different butterflies in our yard. Now we have over 12. We used to have no green anoles, which is a native lizard. And now we do. So native plants makes a big difference. How do you find out what's native in your area? Go to Audubon, and it's it's audubon.org native-plants, and you type in your zip code and they'll give you a list of the native plants. And then you go out, you find them, and you plant those. But please don't plant any more non-native plants. Okay, so greenhouse gas sources, where are they all so we can start fighting them? We need to know where they are. 28% is coming from the generation of electricity. 29% is coming from our transportation. 9% is coming from agriculture, primarily beef, some lambs. 12% is coming from commercial and residential, and 22% is coming from industry. So now, what happens? This is what we all need to do, and we can do. First of all, we all need to be supporting, for the electricity generation, we need to be supporting renewables. Rooftop solar is a no-brainer. If you can put solar on your house, put solar on your house. Wind farms, we need to be supporting wind farms. They do not kill birds. They do kill some bats, but we're getting a handle on that. Whenever you go out to buy an appliance, make sure you buy an Energy Star appliance. And if you have an incandescent light bulb, throw it away. Put it in the landfill. That's where it belongs. And you know, this past Christmas, I realized that I had incandescent light bulbs. All of my old Christmas tree lights were incandescent bulbs. I pitched them, and now we have the LED lights. It's wonderful. We can all do those types of things. Transportation. We can have electric cars. Plug-in vehicles are very important. So make a pact with me today. Your next car that you're going to buy plugs in. It doesn't have to be full electric if you don't want it to be, but make sure that it gets at least 50 miles to the gallon by plugging it in. It makes a huge difference. It really does. Can we do it? Of course we can, especially with battery life coming better and better all the time. Agriculture. What we need to all be doing is having a plant-based diet. Can we do that? Again, we can. When I was a little girl, my grandmother always had fish on Fridays. So now what do we do here in my family? We have meatless Mondays. Well, and meatless Thursdays and meatless Saturdays. And I have a friend of mine that always picks one meal a day, one of her 3 meals a day, to make it completely meatless and dairy-free. There's imaginative ways you can do this. All of us can do it. You can do it. You just have to make the decision to do it and do it. Commercial and residential, how do we fight that 12%? Zero emission buildings. Now, all of us can get energy audits from your power company. Please call them up and ask for them to do an energy audit of your home. You'll find out what you can do to change. And many times it's very trivial things to change, and it'll make a big difference in your energy bill, your electric bill every month. So it's possible to do things like that. You either turn up your thermostat or turn down your thermostat, whichever it is, and depending upon what the season is, you can do that too. Also, unplug things that you don't need. We have a toaster that drives me nuts. At 3 o'clock in the morning while we're sleeping, it's sitting there saying, I'm ready to make toast, I'm ready to make toast, I'm ready to make toast. Why does it have to be doing that? It doesn't. So I unplug it every night before I go to bed. Actually, I unplug it in the morning after I've made my toast. I plug it in to make the toast, I unplug it when it's done. So there's things you can do that way. Your computers, turn your computers off when you're not using them. You can do that. It may take a little bit longer to turn it on again, but that's okay. You can think about what you're going to do while you're sitting there and it's warming up. Industry. This 22% is the toughest of all of them because it's really hard to change industry. We have to have research and development here, but the best thing I think we can do is we've got to be planting trees. How do we get all of that CO2 out of our atmosphere? Well, the best way truly is by planting trees. And I've done a lot of work on trying to figure out who plants the best trees. And yes, there are good trees and bad trees to be planting. You want to be planting native trees, and you want to be planting them in a way that it's not all one species. So it's there's different species combined with each other. That's what cooleffect.org does. And if you want a really good Christmas present, go to cooleffect.org, type in what you think your friends' carbon emissions are. They will tell you how much it will cost to offset those carbon emissions. You pay that, and then you tell your friend that you've taken care of his carbon emissions or her carbon emissions for the year or for the month or whatever you want to do. It's a fabulous Christmas present. All of the people who know me, that's what they get, and they love it, except for the little kids, of course. But anyway, here are things we can do. We just have to do it. It's easy. We can all do it. The thing that is most important right now, and even being a climate scientist, the thing that I am spending all of my time on right now is getting the vote out. So I can't stress strongly enough, you have to get out and vote. Please, please, please. Your voice truly matters. We've got to get out and vote. Please, we have to do that. Now, I know many of you will remember seeing this picture for the first time. I think it was taken in 1968. And the first time I saw it, I got goosebumps and I thought, holy mackerel, look how fragile our Earth looks. And you guys, it is fragile. And it is the only one we've got. So we've really got to take care of it. And we can take care of it. But we just have to step up and do it. And all of us can take a responsibility and go for it and make a difference. And it will truly make a difference. Thank you all for listening to me. And here's my information if you'd like to contact me. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I think Mark is coming on.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Rudd, for your wonderful presentation tonight and all of the valuable information, as well as all the work you've done throughout your career. We'll open it up for questions right now, so people should be able to submit questions via the chat or comment functions. And Dr. Rudd, are you seeing at the bottom of the screen the one from Mike Noreen?
I do see that. And what it's saying is, what if the growing zones where you live have changed? Is it okay to plant a tree that grows well in that new zone? That is exactly what you should be doing, because all of the growing zones have indeed changed. There's been a huge change, and you need to take it into account. People say, oh, it's not going to cost me money that the globe is warming. Well, that's not true, because people don't understand that their yards are going to die because the plants are not going to be used to that heat. So we're going to have to take out trees and put in new trees. And this is what we want to be doing. So when you're planting new plants, make sure you're planting trees that will live there and as the zones are changing. Yes. Are there any other questions? Please put them in the chat box and I'll try to read them. Oh, there have to be questions. I'm sure there are. Okay, what if that tree is not native to your area? That's right. What if that tree is not native to your area? What you need to be doing is looking at what will come with what I do, is I look at what will be coming when we have 2 degrees Celsius warming. And there are lots of maps around to show what that's going to be. And yes, it's not going to be native, but it will be native. It will be the right tree, not native, but it will be the right tree to put in your area in the future. So yes, that is what you should do. When I was planting my native garden out in front, I wasn't too worried about that because I was primarily planting flowers. I did plant a red cedar, but red cedar is fairly has a wide range that it can live in. But yes, you do. When you're talking about trees, you do need to make sure that you're planting a tree that is going to sustain itself. Good point, Mike. I appreciate that. What was the source of the slide info about CO2 emissions by US state? I got that from NOAA, I believe, is where I got that from, and it's in 2016. It's all you do is look for CO2 emissions and you'll be able to find it by state. Anything else?
While we wait for possibly a few more people to submit questions, I'll just ask one verbally, seeing as though I have a microphone and can. So you've spent your entire career working on climate science, and I really appreciate how you phrased your presentation as it gets really, really depressing, but then there's some hope at the end of that. What do you feel like are some of the biggest challenges that you've had in this line of work?
Well, the hardest times that I have had have been with naysayers. I actually got into this line of work because when I first started, there were a lot of naysayers saying that the thermometers weren't reading right. And so we didn't really know that the world was warming. That didn't make sense to me, but what they meant was that we had heat islands in cities. And as the cities grew up, the temperatures in those areas got warmer, so the thermometers were getting warmer. Well, we have thermometers that aren't in cities, and they were showing that we were getting warmer. But I thought, okay, if I look at the species, that I would actually be able to find out if species are telling us that the globe is warming. And I predicted that if the globe was warming, things would be happening earlier in the spring, later in the fall, and things would be moving toward the poles, north in the northern hemisphere, south in the southern hemisphere, and up in elevation and in the oceans going deeper. And all of those predictions came true. So that's what I did, was try to tell people about that. But when I first started this, I would give my talks and I would get heckled a lot. And that was very, very difficult for me. It was very, very difficult for me. I didn't know how to handle it well. And I'm not sure there's a way to handle it well. I guess there is, but I didn't know. But then after a while, it all stopped and I just kept doing what I was doing. And now I'm surprised that in my talks, I just gave a talk before the pandemic at a church. Shoot, I don't remember what the name of the church was. Episcopalian church. And it was a men's group. And I was giving a talk, and right in the middle of my talk, a man started heckling me. So the heckling I've talked to friends of mine, the heckling has started again. And I'm sad about that because I think what we're finding is it has become a political football. People are seeing it. The Republicans are saying climate change isn't occurring, and Democrats are saying it is. And as my late husband used to say, I've never seen a Democratic fire or a Republican flood. They are fires and floods. They don't have anything to do with a political party. It is a problem. It is happening. Everything that we predicted would happen is happening the way we thought it would. And we need to be doing something about it. We have to work fast. We only have 10 years to really change things around. Can we do it? Yes, we can. But we got to get going on it. So here's another question. Should I feed birds in winter? You know, I am asked that question quite often. I actually feed birds a lot. I feel that, and I don't have the science behind this, but this is what I feel. I feel that people have gone in and stripped away the habitat for species, so that it's not easy for them to find the food that they need. So I feel as though I should be trying to help those species as much as I can. Now, you have to be careful and not feed hummingbirds so long that they stay and they don't migrate on, because then you're going to have a hummingbird in the middle of winter that you're going to have to keep warm in your home. And I've actually known people who have done that. So you have to use some common sense. But my answer to your question is I do. I do think that feeding birds, I do think it is something that is important to do, because we've ruined their habitat and we're trying to give back to them. So that's what I've done. So thanks for the question. I appreciate that. Do you feel that the term climate change is used by deniers to minimize more critical term global warming? You know, it's funny. My late husband started working on global warming back in 1985. And he published a book called Global Warming in, I think it was 1979. Don't hold me to that. It may be 82 or something like that, but somewhere around in there. And then people started saying, oh, warming just sounds like it's warm and toasty and everything's fine, so let's change it to something else. So they changed it to climate change. I have trouble actually with both of them. I would rather call it climate disruption, because that's what we're doing, is we're disrupting the climate. But that'll never catch on. That doesn't have the nice sound to it as normal. So I interchangeably use climate change and global warming. I focus more on climate change just because global warming, I don't know why. I guess I just feel like it does sound nice and calm and warm and toasty, and I don't want people to think it's warm and toasty. It's hot and miserable. So, but I've published papers calling it climate disruption, and it didn't catch on at all. So anyway, that was what the Obama's science advisor actually called it too. He and I had a conversation about that, and we came up with the fact that climate disruption would be good. But anyway, thanks for the question. Anything else? How do I recycle plastic bags that have accumulated in my garage? You throw them in the landfill, but before you throw them in the landfill, cut them apart so that there isn't this circle, because the circle will get around seals, will get around fish, will get around everything and get stuck. So recycling plastic bags, you can't do. There was an interesting group of people who took plastic bags and cut them into strips like yarn, and they knitted dog pads for dogs. I thought it was brilliant, but there's only so many of those you can use. You know, it doesn't, yeah. So there's no way that you can recycle plastic bags. What you have to do is you just have to not use plastic bags. The other thing that I use plastic bags for is to pick up poop. So when my dog poops, I have plastic bags, but I try very hard to only get the plastic bags that are biodegradable. And you can get plastic bags if you go to Trader Joe's. I don't have any stock in Trader Joe's, but I think Trader Joe's is a fabulous company. They have plastic bags to put your vegetables in at the vegetable counters, and they are biodegradable. And they do not use plastic bags at the checkout. They only use paper, but we can all use cloth bags, and that's something important. And I'll just say, Mark, I do a talk on plastic. If you want me to come back sometime, I'll give you all a talk on plastics. So, good question. How do we move away from dairy and meat and still do what's right for our already struggling farmers? Oh, that is a fabulous question. That's a fabulous question. Audubon has, I'm sorry I keep touting Audubon, but since I was on the board for 9 years, I know what they've been doing. I'm sure there's other groups that have been doing things, but what Audubon now is doing is they have ranchers that ranch cattle, and they certify them as being good for the birds that live on the property. And what they do is they allow the grassland birds, and grassland birds are one of the groups of birds that are plummeting the fastest, not the fastest, but pretty fast. They're probably the second fastest. And they certify that the ranchers grow their cattle in a way to allow the grassland birds to actually reproduce and survive. So that's helpful. But is it helpful to CO2? No. Other than the fact, I have to put a caveat, other than the fact that they are helping the ground to go back to having native grasses. And the native grasses have huge, huge long root systems, and they're actually sequestering carbon very, very well. So if you have to have meat, if you have to have beef, then I would strongly suggest, again, I'm trying to think of the name of the beef group, and I'm sorry, it's blue something, but I can't come up with it. I assume you could find it if you go to Audubon and go for a grassland bird safe beef, and it will tell you where you can buy your meat. And it's grass-fed beef. It's done humanely. They're killed humanely. It's a tough one that you're asking me. What we need to do is we need to be transferring those dairy farmers and those ranchers to growing other things. And that's a hard thing to do because that's a lifestyle change. And I have a hard time with that. So it's tough. It's a tough one. There's not easy answers to all of this, right? Is it true that global warming has decreased the size of birds as reported in the past year in the Tribune? Yes, indeed. It has really changed a lot of the different sizes of birds. It has, because as it gets warmer, they can get smaller. They don't have to be as big. It has also changed the length of their wings. So they're having to migrate farther than they did before. And so the wings are getting longer. So species are very resilient. They are very resilient if they can be, and things are changing. And yes, indeed, that has changed. I do know that.
It looks like that might be getting close to the end of the questions.
Okay.
Oh, there's somebody who just wanted to thank you again. Before we go, I just want to remind people of 2 upcoming events. One of them is on December 3rd, and it will be the University of Wisconsin River Falls Office of Sustainability presenting on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And then the other one is on January 25th. We will have another Nobel Prize laureate presenting, Dr. Jonathan Overpeck. And Terry, I know that you personally know Dr. Overpeck. I was wondering if you wanted to just do a little pitch about him or anything to help highlight that.
I would. There's a lot of scientists out there that can't talk about science to the general public because they don't know the language. We call him Peck, Dr. Overpeck, I call him Peck, is one of those scientists that is fabulous at taking very complex scientific information and putting it out there in a way that the general public can hear. And he is the information that he has is priceless. So I'm going to be listening that night. I will be there.
Well, perfect. Thank you so much. Both of those events will be hosted again by the River Falls Public Library, just like tonight's event. So please save those dates. And if you are watching on YouTube, please consider subscribing to the River Falls Public Library YouTube channel, as that will help them out. So with that, thank you again to Dr. Root, and thank you to everyone who participated. We hope you have a good evening.